these weapons which were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their capacity was 15 kilotons, their killing capacity. Now, an average nuclear weapon has a killing capacity of at least 10 times, 150 kilotons. But most nuclear weapons have a capacity of 1500 and some even 15,000 kl. If somebody decides to launch a nuclear attack, he's going to launch 100 missiles at a time with a few hundred nuclear weapons loaded on them. And the enemy, his adversary, will also launch hundreds of missiles. And in approximately 12 hours, the entire human civilization will be annihilated. AI is also used in the nuclear weapons systems. AI is not yet authorized to launch a nuclear weapon in any of the countries, but AI plays an important role in the decision support systems which guide the humans who take the decision of launching a missile. So if AI gives wrong information, and if AI misinterprets something that's happening at incoming missiles, and gives a warning of an attack, then the humans who are in charge of the launch decision will launch an attack, thinking that they are launching a counterattack, but actually it might be an attack. Deepstate are the people who are permanent members of a government living in dark, who move from party to who support all parties, who have close links with the government, who have close links with intelligence agencies, with the military, with the big capital, with the media, and they decide the priorities, and then they influence whoever the rulers are.
Hi guys, this is Raghav here, your host of Discovery of an Author podcast. And in this episode, we sit down with Dr. Sundeep Waslekar. Sundeep Waslekar is known for developing policy concepts for peaceful change and is the president of Strategic Foresight Group. And his ideas have been discussed by the House of Commons of the United Kingdom, the Indian Parliament, and forums of the United Nations, including the United Nations Security Council. And in this very powerful and very interesting episode, we deep dive into Sundeep's recent book, A World Without War, in which we discuss the future of humanity. How does and where does war comes in the picture, the role of AI, and the kind of warfare that in today's time can endanger the human species. We also discuss that war is a choice made by the top political leaders and what we as citizens could do about it. We also discuss about the importance of morality, of having very just opinion of the world to tackle this problem of warfare that affects all of us. Watch this episode till the very end, and I am 100% confident that you're going to love this entire aspect of warfare, of AI, and what is the future of human species as a whole. And if you're liking the kind of authors that we're bringing and the kind of content that we're developing, please, it's a humble request, do like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. This is the only way in which we can grow and get more authors to you and more amazing stories. Thank you. Sundeep, hi. Welcome to Discovery of an Author podcast. It is brilliant to have you, on this podcast, and I'm really looking forward to have some amazing conversations with you. So, welcome to this podcast.
Well, thank you, Raghav. Thank you for reaching out to me.
Yeah, it's Sundeep. I have to tell you something. Your book, A World Without War, is the most powerful book that I have ever read. Trust me. When I started reading a book, the first thing that came into my mind was, this is what Yuval Noah Harari should have written. I could really see that this book is in that league of nexus of Homo sapien, of species, because your book is not just about war. It is something that is a study of humanity as well. It was so vast. The kind of topics and verticals that you have covered in the book were remarkable. You're talking about philosophy, you have talking about religion, you have talking about nationalism, you're talking about morality in the book, you're talking about geopolitics in the book, you're talking about technologies, you're talking about warfare, weapons, whatnot. So one of the most powerful books that I have ever read. I am going to reread this book in paperback. that's the impact that your work has had on me and my team. My team said the same thing, ki Raghav, we have right now read it in Kindle, but we are again going to purchase the paperback because this is such an important book and people should know, all these things. So Sandeep, I'm gonna start with a couple of highlights which I loved, and I really want to start with the highlight. Let it hit hard to the people and the viewers who are listening. So two highlights I'm going to start off with. This is the first highlight. We as a species are surrendering the ability to annihilate our civilization to machines.
Yes.
We are blindly walking towards a precipice. We do not worry about the threat of human extinction because we do not see anyone using nuclear weapons. Just as we lived in denial about terrorism until Al Qaeda hit the Twin Towers in 2001, about pandemics until the coronavirus affected 500 million people since 2019, and about wars until Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. I'm going to repeat this line again. We as a species are surrendering the ability to annihilate a civilization to machines. What a powerful wake up call for people to understand that, that terminated like situation exists right now, but we are not, looking at it. And the second highlight, which is equally powerful, we need to help mankind to endure, not perish. For millions of men and women before us have built and shaped the civilization that is here today, even though some of them sometimes went astray. To help humankind rise to the challenges of our collective survival is not a choice. It is an ethical obligation to our species. Sandeep, thank you for writing this book. So Sandeep, I'm going to start with first question. Okay.
Sure.
And I'm going to, whatever questions I have right now, I'm going to ask from a general person's perspective. Because citizens, I need to know. Okay. So the first question is, I am an Indian. I have been born and brought up in the Indian ecosystem. I have been, growing up, I've heard stories of Mahabharata, of Ramayana, of all my gods and goddesses. They were always engaged in war. Navratri is the celebration of Ma Durga. Why? Because she defeated a demon. And when you say that she defeated somebody, I am hoping that there was a war-like situation. It was not a one-on-one battle, as it is there in the Puranas. The other enemy had an army of his own. The deity had an army of her own. And they were all engaged in battle. We celebrate Mahabharata not because Krishna was a dynamic personality, no, because the war was won by the Pandavas. That is why it is called Jaya, which is Vijay, which is war. We celebrated Ram, we celebrate Diwali because he came back from Lanka by defeating a demon via war. There was war, there was bloodshed, a lot of things happened in Ramayana as well, and we celebrate these stories. That's how we have grown up with. It seems to me, Sandeep, the path towards peace is via war. War exists so that peace can happen. Now, whether that can sustain itself or not, that's a secondary question. But it seems to me, even by history and mythology and stories of gods and goddesses, that war is inevitable. War is what gives you peace. War is what gives you stability. So we all are aware of war, but I am not aware of peace. I don't know what a peaceful society is. I don't know what peace looks like. So if we as a civilization have to go towards peace or have to target peace as something which is good and beautiful, could you help us paint a picture that what is a world without war? How could it look? Why should I strive for it? But there are many stories about war. I don't know what peace is. So I would want you to tell us, what is peace?
Raghav, thank you. Again, thank you for a very, very, very stimulating question. But first of all, war is a choice. Even though human history is full of stories of war, and it's not only in the Indian legends, in the Indian mythology, it is everywhere. I studied at Oxford, and even in Oxford, when the First World War was announced, the students at Oxford considered it a matter of pride to join the wars, go to the trenches, fight, and get killed. So, war represents valor, war represents some kind of a cause, and people want to join it. But war is always a choice that somebody makes. War is not inherent to the human nature. Violence might be, but war is an organized effort. A pilot uh, in a bomber aircraft might go and bomb uh, a village or a school, kill 500 children, but that same pilot may be at a local pub, uh, and he may be too scared to get into a brawl with a guy who is drunk. Because when he is a pilot, he has an aircraft, he has bombs, he has a whole system, he has a science that developed that aircraft. So war is a system. It's not individual aggression. And every war I have explained in my book, and you have read it. Is the choice that somebody makes, and so there can be peace. Uh, now, for example, one of the biggest wars in history was the series of crusades, and the Roman Catholic Church launched a crusade in 1095, claiming that the Muslims had captured Jerusalem in the 7th century, and they wanted to take it back. Now, if you go back to history, by 300 years or 400 years, are the Red Indians going to launch a war against all those who are occupying North America today? Because 400 years ago, there was an injustice done against them. So you can find any reason that happened 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, but you're only finding a reason. It's a situation which makes war implausible. There are societies where there hasn't been a war for decades. Switzerland hasn't fought a war for 500 years. Sweden is now worried about a war with the developments in Ukraine, but hasn't fought a war for more than 100 years. So there are countries in the world where there hasn't been a war for decades and decades. But Africa has stopped fighting wars between the countries since the beginning of this century. With one exception, there was a war between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and there is a latent war of Polisario between Morocco and Africa. But otherwise, there are countries like Africa has not really fought war for the last 25 years, but Latin America no war for more than 100 years. So how does this society look like? How does Switzerland look like? How does Scandinavia look like? These are the countries where peace prevails. And 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 once you do not have war, these countries have the luxury of concentrating on welfare of humanity, of welfare of population in those countries. So you have high standard of living, you have high innovation. Switzerland ranks first in the global innovation index. It produces only 3% of watches in the world, but earns 97% of the revenue from the watch industry because of its creativity. Uh, you have very little incidence of poverty because you are able to allocate resources for food, for housing, for health. It makes it possible for people to explore the better angels of their nature. To go to But peace empowers. Peace allows you to be creative. Peace allows you to be generous. Peace allows you to bless others.
But Sandeep, tell me, for Switzerland to reach up to a position or to live in this very polarizing and a very sensitive world without war or without any threat, they, I think, have very consciously developed their systems in a way wherein they know that they have a very strong leverage. And their leverage is their banking system. Their leverage is that all the wealth of the world is in that country. And it is secure. You call it the black or the white. You can't just pass that. Nobody can scrutinize that. Nobody can take it. All the countries are fighting to just find out the holders of the bank accounts and the money. So they have a very strong leverage, I feel. So if, let's say, and I think that's the reason why Switzerland is able to come up to a position wherein no country would dare invade or no country would dare destroy, because they invariably would be harming their own assets and resources. I think that is very smart thing that Switzerland has done. Do you think that, yes, this is one of the reason also that Switzerland has no reason for a war and it is under no threat? And if a country would want to reach up to that position, they need to have some kind of a leverage in the world wherein people are like, yes, we cannot live without this geography. We cannot live without this country. What they're offering to us is invaluable. So I want to understand that, do you think this is a valid point? Do you think that these leverages also help them to be very neutral when it comes to warfare, invasions, and getting invaded by various other parties?
Raghav, Switzerland has been having this secret banking system for about 100 years. But they have been living without war for the last 500 years.
500 years.
And there was no bank for 500 years.
Yeah,
the institution of bank, leave aside the Swiss bank, was not there. So So it is not that Switzerland is living without a war because of the banking system. It's the other way around. It is because Switzerland has freed itself from war. Other countries have put their resources there, and Switzerland has helped them with their secrecy law and developed a banking. So the Swiss banking system is a result of the absence of war. It is not a cause because the banks have really come much later. Switzerland signed that agreement with their neighboring countries in 1815. That's more than 200 years ago. Swedes made the country neutral. It was a neutrality act. In fact, now for the first time in the history of 500 years, some people in Switzerland are considering to join NATO, which is a military alliance. Now, after 500 years. So now, in fact, when the Swiss banking system is developed and their industry is developed and their nature is bountiful and is developed as a tourist market, at this time, in fact, there are people in Switzerland who would like to join NATO. And in 2026, so next year, there will be a referendum in Switzerland to determine whether to go on a military path or whether to preserve their 500-year-old independence. But leave aside Switzerland. There are some 22 countries in the world which have given up armies, which do not have weapons, which do not have the Ministry of Defense. And we might say some of these are small countries, but some of them are large countries. Switzerland, in fact, has an army. It has standing army, but there are other countries. You have Costa Rica. Now, Costa Rica is surrounded by a very bellicose country. There were wars taking place all around Central America until 1985. And it was the Costa Rican president, Oscar Arias Sanchez, who negotiated a comprehensive peace pact between all the countries of the Central America. And since then, there has not been a war there. But Costa Rica itself gave us the military, renounced the military in 1940. Costa Rica's neighbor, Panama, which has a huge asset, a very strategic asset, Panama, is also without army. Panama gave up army law. So there are 22 countries, and there are very small countries like Qatar wants an army and huge defense base. And you have Bahrain as a defense base. Singapore is a small country, but it has a big base. So it's not a question of being small or big. I mean, you have small countries like Singapore and Qatar, which believe in having military, and you have small countries like Costa Rica, Panama, and many others, which do not have military. So again, war is a choice.
Yeah.
And these countries, these 22 countries, have made a choice that they do not want military, they do not want to even think of the option of war. Now, go further. There are 122 countries who have subscribed to a resolution of the United Nations in 2017 that they do not want nuclear weapons. So, out of 193 countries which are members of the UN, 122, 123 countries have declared that they don't want at least nuclear weapons. They have conventional. So that's again a choice they have made. So it's not a question of having a hedge because Switzerland didn't have a hedge before 100 years in terms of the banking system. It's really a question of the priority. But now, if the same Switzerland is thinking of buying, or not all of Switzerland, but at least some people there, then it's a choice there's something else. So it's always a matter of choice. If 22 countries decided to live without the army, I'm sure 50 countries decided. And if 50 countries decide, we will have 1/4 of the world totally demilitarized. It is not impossible. In 1930s, not so long ago, a country like the United States, which is now in the forefront of bombing many other countries, was against using air force in a war. It was Germany that opposed the United States and insisted on using air force in a war. But once upon a time, not too long ago, the United States was against using air force. In the 1930s, US, France, Britain were thinking of putting limits on the naval power, and they had negotiated. So there have been times when countries have negotiated that there should not be a huge military or there should not be war. And the most interesting example, though it failed few years down the line, was the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 27 August 1928. On that day in Paris, all the big powers of the Western world, including Germany, including Russia, signed the pact to renounce war as an instrument of public policy and to resolve all conflicts in negotiation.
Yeah.
Now, these failed because there was a recession, and the German people elected Hitler, and Hitler didn't care for this fact, and walked out. But efforts have been made. One last effort I have to mention is the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1722. So there is a resolution in the record of the UN General Assembly, which was passed in December 1921, which denounces war. The renunciation of the war is not in the Charter of the United Nations, but it is there in the General Assembly Resolution of 1720. So General Assembly resolutions are not mandatory, unlike Security Council, they are mandatory. But there is a resolution which is a blueprint for a free world, a world without war, and which people can decide to use anytime.
So I'm going to ask the next question, and this is going to be opened up with an highlight, which has been taken from the book.
Right.
If the human race has to survive, there is no other option but to begin thinking about a world without war and pathways to build one. This is a very strong statement because it starts with the line saying, if the human race has to survive. So right now, we are not talking about some geographies who are within war amongst themselves. We are talking about our entire species. And your book centers around the fact that this species is at risk because of what is happening on a very global level, that a person like my father or my mother or my friends might not be able to see, but it does not mean that does not exist. That's a very scary part. So again, I'm going to re-quote this thing. If the human race has to survive, there is no other option but to begin thinking about a world without war and the pathways to build one. Which brings me to the question. You mentioned the possibility of a war of human extinction, species. Do you believe human beings are inherently inclined towards conflict, or is this a product of the system that we created? There's a very thin line somehow, because not everybody could be put into one bracket that yes, it's inherent, yes, they war. There are people who are, it is inherent in their nature to averse such things. So it's very tricky to understand.
Well, the answer is very straightforward. As I said earlier, war is a matter of choice. So if it is a matter of choice, it is not inherent to human nature. It is a choice that some leaders make and others follow them. So to answer your question, wars result from systemic decisions. They don't result from the nature of man. There has been a big debate throughout history whether man by nature is a fox or a wolf or a and Hobbes was of the opinion that you cannot trust a man. I mean, man is wild, man is a wolf, man cannot be trusted. But there are others like Rousseau who say that man is inherently good. So this question, and it's not only for Hobbes and Rousseau. It goes back to the days of Confucius. Confucius had two disciples. One was Mencius and one was Shunzi. Both were disciples of Confucius. Not at the same time. They were there with a difference of few decades. And Mencius believed that human being is inherently good and wants peace and coexistence. And Shunzi believed that human being cannot be trusted. Human being is bellicose. Human being is in a state of war. So this debate has been going on. So there are people who believe that the human nature is inherently for conflict, for violence. But there are other philosophers who have argued that humans are inherently good in their souls, but there are systems of societies which make which create conflicts and the larger conflicts then get converted into wars. But I have been talking about a war of human extinction for technological reasons. See, wars have been fought for at least 3,000 years in the recorded history. Maybe longer. Maybe I think maybe 4,000-5,000 years. So they have been fought for a long time. We had two world wars in the last century. Nuclear weapons were used in the last phase of the Second World, and these were pilot. These weapons came out of a pilot project, and they were dropped on two small towns, and the death toll was about 200,000. And these weapons, which were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their capacity was 15 kilotons, their killing capacity. Now, an average nuclear weapon has a killing capacity of at least 10 times, 150 kilotons. But most nuclear weapons have a capacity of 1,500 and some even 15,000 TNT. So So the nuclear weapons are quite dangerous. Also, in today's era, nobody is going to use one nuclear bomb or two nuclear bombs that it happened with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What's going to happen is if somebody decides to launch a nuclear attack, he's going to launch 100 missiles at a time with a few hundred nuclear weapons loaded on them. And the enemy, his adversary, will also launch hundreds of missiles. And in approximately 12 hours, the entire human civilization will be annihilated. So this is where we are. What is made worse by this is that one side the nuclear weapons are getting modernized. See, the number of nuclear weapons has declined. In 1980, it was 60,000. It's come down to 10,000, roughly, 8,000 in the active service. But they are being modernized, and their lethal power is increased. But now you have another weapon, and that is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So basically, artificial intelligence (AI) is used for good of humanity, for agriculture, for health, for education, for a lot of creative things. But AI is also used in the nuclear weapon systems. It's not AI is not yet authorized to launch a nuclear weapon in any of the countries, but AI plays an important role in the decision support systems which guide the humans who take the decision of launching a missile. So if AI gives wrong information and if AI misinterprets something that's happening in incoming missiles and gives a warning of an attack, then the humans who are in charge of the launch decision will launch an attack, thinking that they are launching a counterattack, but actually it might be an attack. And then the other side would launch a real counterattack. And this way, you would have exchange of missiles with hundreds of warheads. So a global catastrophic war can take place either by intent, which is the decision of the leaders of certain countries, or by incident, which means it's not a conscious decision that the countries are involved in a conventional war and they cross a nuclear threshold before they know it, or by accident. And the accidental war may be started by AI algorithm. And I fear that the way these AI models are being modernized and the way they are evolving, we have a risk, mind you, we have a risk of an accidental nuclear war started by AI in a matter of 10 years. All of us humans on the planet might get converted to skulls and bones and skeletons in 10 to 15 years because of an algorithm. Even if a war takes place between the United States and say Russia or China, and if it's a war involving hundreds of missiles, all of us will be killed. You in Jaipur, me in Mumbai, all of us. Some will be killed with the immediate impact, and they will be the lucky ones. And some will be killed with radiation and environmental impact, dying a gradual death, and they'll be the unlucky ones. And so we are really at precipice. We are. I'm not suggesting that it is certain that this war will take. I'm suggesting that there is a risk, and because it is still at the level of risk, there is enough opportunity for the human species to to develop a new way of governing our planet, to governing our civilization, and pull back from the precipice. But the point is, even if the risk is 1%, for the survival of human civilization, I mean, 1% is huge. Even
Absolutely.
0.1% is huge.
It's too big of a risk to take.
We can't take that risk.
Absolutely.
But we have to first recognize that there is a risk. A lot of people live in denial of the risk. They don't want to accept that this risk is there because they can't see it. They say, oh, the last time the nuclear weapons were used was in August 1945, and all it did was that it killed 200,000 people in two Japanese small towns. But that's not the case anymore. And mind you, it's not just the nuclear weapons. There are also biological weapons and there are lethal autonomous weapons. And so we are developing this new array of weapons. So war is a continuing story for thousands of years. The combination of the intent of war and the capacity to wage civilization-wide annihilation is new.
When I was reading a book, I realized something which worried me a lot. And that is why I believe that this is a possibility, that risk is there by using such technologies, and the outcomes would be devastating for the entire species. Let's talk about the Israeli military and let's talk about the US military, because they are pioneers in terms of technological R&D. Okay. The military has been so intertwined with the technological developments and evolution since many a years that it is scary. Scary why? Internet was a result of a need. They wanted to create an intranet that they can communicate with, and that is how the US military created it. A lot of technologies that you and I are using on a daily basis was a result of a military's need to improve itself and be very strong for the opposition. Military of these powerful countries is linked, is directly proportional with the technological inventions that is happening. And the second part I'll tell you, Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Google. I heard an interview of him. He was in some college. Eric Schmidt is now working with the US military. And I am like, when you have these powerful leaders who have pioneered technology that the global consumers are using on a daily basis, when you know that people are hooked on your technology, they can't do without your technology, they are now working with the US military to increase their efficiency. The scary part is that military, R&D and organizations and technologies, they're going hand in hand. It's not as if both the things are developing in isolation. It's as if the military's demands are getting developed by the tech giants, which brings me to a very important question. I want to understand then, where is India in terms of this R&D? Is India also understanding this part? Is Indian military and R&D, the DRDO also involved? And do we have the capabilities and the capacities to also embrace technology and use it in a very moralistic way? That is very important.
Well, in terms of the military technology and the hardware, it's a work in progress. For a long time, we were totally dependent on imports. Now there is an effort being made to indigenize the production of some of the hardware. But the parts that you are using, including some of the critical parts and particularly engines, they are imported, and that gives the handle to the Western or to the foreign suppliers.
Yeah.
But India has shown the capacity to develop indigenous technology of global standards in some sectors. For example, India is one of the leaders of the space uh, area, I mean the space sector. India is the achievement of Chandrayaan 3 to land on the southern part of moon. It's absolutely amazing, and the research that's being done by the lander and the rover there, Pratnya, it's quite impressive. Also in space, not too long ago, we launched a rocket which carried more than 100 satellites at a time.
Yes.
So India has demonstrated its ability to develop indigenous technology, and it is working in that direction. But it is a work in progress, and it will take time. But I believe that India's greatest strength and India's greatest power is really moral power. People think that hardware is what matters. Of course, hardware is important, and you have to be prepared in the case of an invasion from another country. But moral power is also important. The Indian policy, it's not a policy of no first attack, it's a policy of no first use of nuclear weapons.
Yes.
If China and India are the only two countries which have this policy of no first use,
Yeah.
why aren't the Americans and the Russians and the French and the British willing to accept this no first use? And I'll tell you why. Number of surveys have been done in the US, and I have quoted some of them in my book, A World Without War,
Yeah.
where the question was asked that if the United States launches a preemptive nuclear attack on North Korea or on Iran, as an example, preemptive, which means the other country, the adversary is not attacking you. You decide to attack first. And if this attack results in 1 million deaths or 2 million deaths, will you support? So an attack that you are launching on your own whim, or because of your own calculations, without provocation from the other side, killing 1 million or 2 million people, will you support? And the answer from the common American people was that more than 20 and 30% people were willing to support. So that's huge.
Yes.
Now somebody make a counter argument to no, but they are less than 50%. That's not the point. I mean, if you had 20 or 30% of the population willing to support a preemptive attack, not even a counter attack, which is killing millions of people. Uh, it's tragic. It's a tragedy of the American psychology. And so more than weapons, it's the psychology which is dangerous.
Yes.
Because I believe that weapons do not start wars. Men do. Men who use weapons, they start the wars. Weapons on their own don't start a war. And if this is the psychology, even the UNESCO says in its preamble that it's in the minds of men that the wars start. And it is here that India has a good track record.
Yes.
India not only has a no first use doctrine in its nuclear weapon policy, but India in its history has never attacked a country outside of our subcontinent. There have been wars between the neighboring kings. There have been wars within a limited geography, but we have never crossed Afghanistan. We have never crossed. See the moment Americans learned uh, uh, how to cross the ocean and went to North America. I mean, the moment Europeans learned how to cross a nation and they went to North America, they started invasion. There were civilizations like Maya, Aztec,
Yep.
Inca. These were beautiful civilizations. All of them were invaded just by using superior technology by the Spaniards and others. The British came here in search of the trade, and the trade can be good. It's for exchange of ideas. I mean, what happens through the trade is not just exchange of goods, but there are inherent ideas inside those goods. So they came for that, and then they invaded India through wars. They did the same with China. They have done same with Africa, and the French have done it. So the Europeans have used their technology for improving the living conditions of the people, but they have also used science and technology for colonization and for control and for conflict. India has used the technology for military, but it's mostly for defense,
Yes.
for deterrence. But India has a high moral track record.
Yeah.
Now there is a section of population even in India, in our country, who don't believe in the promise of morality and who believe in the hard power. But hard power doesn't take you too far. You have the United States, which has all kinds of hard power, but the United States was attacked by Al Qaeda from the caves of Afghanistan, and they killed 3,000 people. And there was nothing that the United States could do at that time. Later on, they killed, half the population of Kabul and large sections of population of Afghanistan, and they have killed people in Iraq. But the point is that people have been able to kill. People have been able to attack United States, and many terrorist organizations have attacked the American interests outside of the United States. So weapons have not helped them to go very far. I'm not being naive. You need weapons until the entire world agrees
Yes.
to a multilateral framework of disarmament. And that is what is required. If you want the human species to survive, we need global governance, which is based on gradual reduction of armament. It won't happen overnight. We have to be realistic about it, but we have to have a mental framework. We have to have a psychology of living on less and less arms and more cooperation.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Because we have talking, and I have come to realize since conversing with you, reading a book, that it's the war starts in the minds of men, and it is choices that certain people make. Whilst I was reading a book, there was a mention somewhere about the deep state. And I always used to hear this word, loosely people used to call it deep state. Hai. There is something called cabal state, they used to call it deep state. But I never used to understand, or I never understood what is a deep state. Till I read a book and in which you had specifically mentioned that there is a group of people behind the governments or something like that are making decisions. I wanted to expound on, because this is in continuation with the philosophy of choices. The choices make war, not collective humanity. The choices of few men. From that stems this question, then what is a deep state? What is the definition of deep state, and how they have so much power? And then how are they able to exercise their choice of war? It sometimes bewilders me. Then please tell us, what is a deep state? Who are these people who call themselves deep states, and how are they able to control things from behind?
I'll tell you a real story that happened.
Please.
I have mentioned it in a subtle way in the book. I'll reveal today.
Yes, let's do that.
On your podcast.
Yes, let's do it.
In January 2003 or maybe December 2002, an American intellectual visited Mumbai, very prominent person, and he belonged to the Democratic Party. And at that time, it was the Republican administration in power. George Bush Jr. was the president of the United States. Colin Powell was the Secretary of State. This intellectual, who had many friends in India, was a Democrat and highly respected in the US and highly respected around the world, including in India. So he first visited Delhi and he tried to convince important people in Delhi that they should support American invasion of Iraq, which they were planning.
Yes.
Then he came to Mumbai and he met me and a couple of other people. And he said that I should support American invasion of Iraq. Not that my support would make any difference, but they wanted to mobilize public opinion. And somebody probably told him that maybe my views mattered a little bit here and there. So I asked him, I said, why do you want to attack Iraq? And he said, there are 3 reasons. So I said, what are those reasons? He said, 1, we suspect that they have nuclear weapons. 2, we suspect that they are supporting terrorists. And 3, it's a dictatorship. So I told him, I said, look, if these are your parameters to attack countries, our next door friend Pakistan has nuclear weapons, you don't have to suspect. They support terrorists, you don't have to suspect. It is proven and admitted by themselves. And they are a military dictatorship, which was the case at that time. I said, I'm not suggesting you start bombing Pakistan because it's not the Indian philosophy to ask other countries to start bombing our neighboring countries. But logically, I want to ask you, if these are the parameters you are using, then you are not thinking of Pakistan, you are not thinking of North Korea. Why are you thinking of Iraq? And he said, well, because we want to attack Iraq. And I said, no, but you just gave me 3 reasons. You didn't say that you want to attack because you want to attack. And he said, because in the long run, we think that Iraq will become a very strong country and it will become a rival to Israel. And he said, that's the case with Iraq and Iran. And we don't want any long-term threat to Israel. And Israel is the soul of the United States. India is a friend of the United States. So he said, if you ever face a threat from Pakistan, for the reasons that you mentioned, we will help you as a friend. But if Israel faces the threat, then our soul is at risk. And that's why we want to preempt any threat that might be posed to Israel in 10 or 20 years from now. So now this gentleman belongs to the opposition party in the United States at that time. He's not from the military. He's not from the government at the moment. He had been part of the government earlier. So he is part of the deep state. So deep state are the people who are permanent members of a government living in dark, who move from party to, who support all parties, who have close links with the government, who have close links with intelligence agencies, with the military, with the big capital, with the media, and they decide the priorities. And then they influence whoever the rulers are. And they try to then convince the rulers to go their way. So this is why you would see that the United States is always at war. See, India is not always at war. But United States is always at war. Pakistan is often at war. Not so much with India, but they have been at war with Afghanistan for a long time. And of course, with India as well. But because they have a deep state. So the deep state is a cabal of people whom you can't identify by name or by position, but who are a mutual support group and who are spread in different positions, including in the media where
Yes.
you operate, and they determine the interest of the country from their point of view, and they think they are doing in the glory of their nation. That is their perspective, but the glory of the nation in their perception is defined by their pursuit of power.
This is very scary. I mean, if somebody can understand what is happening, this is extremely scary. And which brings me to the next question. And I tell you why I said if somebody can understand. Uri was a movie that came out Very successful movie. I also remember the time when it came out. It was the time of the elections. Brilliant movie, very cinematic movie, very aesthetically great movie. I loved the movie. When I saw the movie, even I felt like, man, I need to be like Vicky Kaushal. Look at that guy. And I remember the line, ये नया हिंदुस्तान है, ये घुस के मारता है, ये मारेगा भी, and something like that Paresh Rawal says because he was playing the role of Doval. He says that. Second, you have this movie called Oppenheimer. Again, massive pop culture movie, Christopher Nolan, all these Cillian Murphy, all these great actors, showing how the nuclear bomb was created and how it was used to annihilate an entire nation of Japan. And it was banned in Japan. The screening of the movie was banned in Japan because they were like, you are trying to popularize, you are trying to make something a part of pop culture, which for you might be hypernationalism, but for us was a traumatic and a very sad part of the history. And we had to overcome that, and still we are suffering a lot of things because of that. So, Sundeep, tell me, what then is the role of media? Or do you think, in what ways is media propagating this hyper-nationalism within people? In your book, there was a very beautiful, segment about us versus them. Us versus them could be taken from the nationalistic point of view as well, that I am an Indian, you are a Pakistani. Us versus them, Indian versus Pakistani, Israeli versus Palestine. Us versus them could also be taken as a religion, which is again emphasized very strongly in the book. I am a Hindu, he's a Muslim. He's a Christian, he's an Islamic, or he's a Jew. So, three things: media, your nationalistic pride that people can have because of these pop culture things, which are a product of media, and religion. Because very subtly, religion is intertwined with this pop culture of war, of movies. If these three things are pushing us towards a more war-like situation, what could be done?
Media is an instrument. In fact, weapons are an instrument and media also is an instrument. And they are both equally important instrument in the game of war. Weapons may cause a direct destruction, physical destruction. Media causes psychological destruction.
Yes.
It destroys the fabric of trust within the society, between the society. Oppenheimer movie, which you mentioned, has a very powerful conversation in the end between Dr. Oppenheimer and Dr. Einstein, where Oppenheimer says to Einstein that I thought that I was starting a chain which will lead to the complete destruction of the world with the Trinity test. And I now realize that I have just started it. And if you understand what he's trying to say and relate it to the situation today, the character of Dr. Oppenheimer in the movie, which was released last year, is exactly what I'm saying in my book. That we are caught up in this chain, which is leading to complete destruction of the world, and that's what Oppenheimer said then, and it started with the Trinity test, and it's going on now. But people, I asked many people, hundreds of people, nobody heard this conversation. If they heard, they just heard. They didn't listen to it.
Yeah,
they have not reflected on it. If you ask people about this movie, they talk about cinematographic effect. They talk about the beautiful acting. They talk about an incident here or there which upsets them or makes them happy. But they don't talk about the central message which was delivered in this movie, in this medium, that we are on a path of self-destruction of the entire civilization, and we have to arrest this process.
Yeah.
We have to stop this chain. We have to cut this chain. So now you look at another movie. It was called The Day After. It was shown in the 1980s. So when Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States, and Ronald Reagan was a very hawkish president. He wanted a strong army. He wanted Star Wars. He wanted huge military budget. Now Ronald Reagan saw this movie, and this movie shows that if a nuclear war takes place, it doesn't show the destruction of entire humankind, but it shows that large parts of the planet Earth will be destroyed, including large parts of the United States. And he saw that movie, and he was so impacted that he contacted Gorbachev, who was then the president of the Soviet Union, and he sought a meeting with him, and they met in Reykjavik in Iceland. And Reagan proposed that nuclear weapons should be completely abolished. So he was not willing to renounce the war, but he was willing to renounce the nuclear weapons, which could lead to the end of humanity. That was the power of a movie. Of course, in addition to movie, there were a couple of other developments took place. Uh, there was a young woman there, and she launched a movement called Freeze, and people got so motivated by her that uh, they marched in New York, more than 1 million people, and they asked for peace. So he was impacted by uh, 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 actions of just common people, and he was impacted by a movie. Two things happening at the same time. So medium can be a very powerful instrument, now, including movies, including the media, including the newspapers. Uh, some years ago, a young woman in Pakistan and a young woman in India, whom I knew, both of them, they did an interesting study. They analyzed the media content of the print media over a period of 5 years or 10 years in Pakistan and in India, the national media. And they asked a question: is media a weapon of war or a purveyor of peace?
Good question. Yes.
And they asked this question. The question you're asking is media a weapon of war? And what they found was amazing with documentary evidence of media content analysis from both sides. What they found was that media is neither a weapon of war nor a weapon of peace, but it is a handmaiden of government. So the content analysis showed that whenever the leaders of two countries wanted peace, suddenly the media started glorifying peace, and the media started talking about the virtues of cooperation between India and Pakistan and understanding and people to people contact and trade and everything. And whenever the government decided that they wanted to go on a hostile path for whatever reason, because they always blame the other party, the media suddenly decided that they wanted to promote enmity, and it's gone up and down like this. That so the media on its own was never a weapon of war nor a purveyor of peace. It always followed the cue from the government. I had another experience. It's also about India Pakistan, but it's about the British media. In 2002, long time ago, the Indian and Pakistani forces were face to face on the border. And at that time, Atalji was the prime minister and had good relations with his advisors and people around him. And I knew that there was no possibility of a war, and that the Indian prime minister and the Pakistan leadership and nobody, that this was all little bit of a you can say brinksmanship, but there was really absolutely no possibility of war. I knew it. So when I was arrived in London, suddenly all the Fleet Street media, all the big newspapers contacted me, and they said, there is likely to be a war on between India. I said, look, I I know. I mean, there is no likelihood of a war. There is tension, but there is no likelihood of a war, a big war. I was taken to the office of one of the newspapers, and they had prepared a huge map on the front page, a major world newspaper on the front page with graphs which showed how Pakistan would bomb Mumbai and how minute by minute Mumbai would get destroyed. And I said, look, and similarly they are done for how if India bombs Lahore or whatever. How so? I said none of this is going to happen. But they said that our government, the UK government, has said that that uh, that there will be a war, and you put out the stories that there will be a war. Uh, and they just wanted me to confirm. Now I couldn't tell them that I was talking to somebody in Delhi, but I told them I'm running a think tank and I have good analytical skills and all, and I go by evidence. I don't go by emotions and by rumors. And the evidence is not showing any indication of war. Evidence is only showing tensions. Evidence is not showing war. But the media just wanted to push the story of of a of a war. Now I'll give you another example from recent times. The Ukraine war in its latest phase started in February 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. But 1 month later, in March, Russian president's representatives and Ukrainian president's representatives met in Istanbul, and they entered into a peace agreement. And this peace agreement was signed by their representatives. It was not even verbal. There's a document which has been signed.
Interesting.
It has been signed, and that document was taken back by their respective representatives. And this happened in March. And there was going to be one final meeting on the 9th of April. And after that, Zelensky and Putin were set to sign. And this Ukraine war was almost ending, which is going on. This was an agreement signed. I have seen the document. I have made the witness who was in the room. And I have
Interesting.
spoken to him at depth. Okay. But during that time, now if I know it in Mumbai, of course the world media had to know. But the world media totally boycotted this story. World media deliberately boycotted this story because they wanted to promote the concept of war. And then Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister of UK, took advantage of this, and he went to Kiev in the first week of April, and he forced Zelensky not to sign and to drop the agreement. And this is how the war has continued. The Ukraine war had ended on paper in the form of signatures of the representatives of the two presidents, and the media sabotaged the peace agreement. And it's the same story with nationalism.
Yeah.
Just as media can be instrument of good and instrument of evil, similarly nationalism can be an instrument of good
Yes.
and an instrument of danger, of something bad. It's nationalism which got us an independent country, free from colony, and not only India. It's nationalism which has freed more than 100 countries from colonization. But it's nationalism which also creates excessive aggression, conflict, and destruction. So Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote the national anthem, not only of India but also of Bangladesh.
Bangladesh.
So who is the greatest epitome of nationalism, because he converted nationalism into poetry? Who can be more nationalist than Rabindranath Tagore, who makes a precis of nationalism in a beautiful poem, and not for one country but two countries?
Yeah.
This great soul, the Rabindranath Tagore, I call him not Mr. Rabindranath Tagore or Sri Rabindranath Tagore, but the Rabindranath Tagore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Rabindranath Tagore called nationalism a menace of humanity. So it's not at all nationalism is menace. Nationalism can be a force to mobilize the good of your heart. If there is a flood in Assam, whether you are in Jaipur or I'm in Mumbai, I will do my best to help those people, whatever I can do in a limited way. I mean, if I'm a clerk in a bank, there's not much I can do. I might say 100 rupees, but that's it. There are volunteers of organizations. They will run there, risking their own life. It's nationalism. What does a man in Jaipur has to do with a child in Assam?
Yep.
But if Brahmaputra starts crying and there are tears rolling down from Brahmaputra, and if these tears lead to the tears of mothers whose children die, the the mother in Jaipur and the mother in Mumbai and the mother in Chennai cries, and she tells, that she asks authorities, what is that I can do? It's nationalism. It's the nationalism that brings to the front the good of human heart. But there is the other kind of nationalism which the Rabindranath Tagore described as menace, which mobilizes the evil force in your heart because you want to attack somebody who you think is the enemy of your nation without even assessing the facts, without even seeing the evidence. It's only on the basis of perception. And who's making that perception? It's some vested interest who's making that perception. So what I do, only for the purpose of vocabulary, I make a difference between nationalism and patriotism. Patriotism is a good force. We should all be patriotic. I'm a proud patriotic. I would urge you to be a proud patriotic, though I presume you are. But nationalist is something else. Nationalism, the president of France, I don't agree with many of his policies, but I agree with one of his sayings. He says nationalism is Emmanuel Macron. He says nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism.
Sandeep, this brings me to the next question, which I always used to wonder, but I never got a clear answer. What then is the UN peacekeeping force? What does it do? Why does it have a military? And how is it able to keep peace, or is it really able to bring peace? The most known entity out there working towards peace. So I want to know, what are they doing? What is the ground reality? Why do they still have a military which is weaponized?
Well, UN peacekeeping force only acts when there is a conflict between small and poor countries. So
small and poor countries. Okay.
Generally, I mean, not poor as completely poor, but relatively. UN peacekeeping force doesn't act if there is a conflict between, say, US and Russia, which is what's happening in Ukraine now.
They couldn't, or they, I mean, is it because they could not do it, or they are not powerful enough to do it when it comes to
No,
the big
they
powers?
cannot because UN peacekeeping force is sanctioned by the Security Council.
And they consist of.
It draws its legitimacy from Security Council, and they cannot do it because the Security Council members do not sanction a UN peacekeeping force if one of them is involved, or even their allies are involved.
Absolutely.
Leave aside them, even if their allies are involved. So UN peacekeeping force, because of the structure of the Security Council, operates anyway in situations of small. And then sometimes they do a good job, sometimes sometimes they do a very shoddy job, sometimes they even run away. There have been two famous cases of the 1990s when massacres took place and the UN peacekeeping force just ran away or just gave up or just surrendered. One was the example I gave you earlier of the Serbian attack on Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there was a UN peacekeeping force, but they did nothing. And there was around the same time, plus minus 1 2 years, there was a war in Rwanda and Burundi between it was primarily ethnic war between Hutus and Tutsis, and the UN peacekeeping force again ran away from there, and 1 million people were killed. Not a small number. 1 million people were killed. So what is this UN peacekeeping force doing? Now you have a situation in Gaza and Lebanon, and where is the UN peacekeeping force?
Nowhere.
There's nowhere. So UN peacekeeping force, it has done some good work, and at times it has been effective. But first of all, its mandate is most of the time limited to small countries, weak countries. I would not say poor, but I would say rather weak countries, and it doesn't really uh, it doesn't really uh, uh, come into picture when there are real conflicts, when there are big conflicts. So we need a complete revitalization
Yes.
of the United Nations, and that is not an easy task,
Yeah.
but that is essential. And unless we have either in the UN or outside an instrument of conflict resolution which is robust, which is reliable, and which is even accepted by the big powers, there will be an arms race. There will be need for everybody to acquire arms to defend themselves, and there will be a risk to to peace and stability.
Wow, this was Sandeep, I have to show the book. Let's show the book to the audience, because I again want to show the book to the people and tell
Yeah,
them ki what a beautiful book this is. A World Without War. This is a brilliant, brilliant book. The best book that I have read so far. It is just absolutely phenomenal. And I urge people to read this book. I'm going to read this book again, because this is such a vast book. It opened up so many verticals in my head, and I thought that I'm well read. But when I read your book, I realized there's a lot of things that I need to still understand and learn. And this is what a book did to me. Sandeep, now let's do, now that we have done with the scholastic part, and once we, now that we have discussed, I would want to know about you. Who's
okay.
Sandeep? Who's Sandeep? Where does he come from? What was your childhood like? What was your upbringing? It's very important for people to know where you people come from, right? Right now, let's say I meet you or I talk to you, I'll be in awe of the position that you're in. I'll be in absolute awe of the man. Oh, wow, look at his position. But if I come to know that you are also a human being like me, you are also an individual like me, I would, the connect would be better. Let's break the barriers. Sandeep, tell us about your childhood. Where were you born? Your parents, your family, ecosystem, anything that you want. Let's start from that.
Okay, so I I had a very different ambition when I was a teenager,
Okay.
and my ambition was very different from what you would even expect
Tell us what was that?
with my book. So I was brought up in Dombivli,
Mm.
which is a suburb of Mumbai, but at that time, but today it's almost become the part of extended
Yeah.
Mumbai. And I was brought up in a small chawl, which was on the outskirts of a slum. So I was kind of on the borderline of a slum and a chawl. And my mother passed away when I was 6 years old. So my grandmother looked after me, and I have one sister, Archana, so she looked after us. And my sister Archana uh, started to cook since she was 5, almost 5 years old at that young age when she had. And my father was a sales representative in a series of companies, one after another. And in our Dombivli, in our town, there were a lot of street gangs. And my ambition when I was 9, 10 years old was to join a street gang and become a dada.
I could have never imagined. No, wow, that is brilliant.
And so I actually joined some street gangs. And I used to move around with these gangs with chains and
Wow.
iron bars and sticks, and we used to
Oh,
move around. And
wow.
we didn't go and beat up anybody, but we just got kind of a sense of ego
Yeah.
and power just by having those jets and all that.
Yeah.
So this is what uh, this is what this was one aspect of my life. There was another aspect of my life at that time. When I was 10 years old, the man walked on the moon. Man, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, they walked on the moon. And some local Lions Club or something organized a competition for children, our school children, to make an album or a scrapbook of the pictures uh, of the man's victory or the conquest of the moon. So I participated in that, and it was for all the school children. I was the youngest, just 10, but I got the first prize. So I felt very encouraged. Now there was no access to books in Dombivli. So where would I get the books with the pictures of man walking on the moon? So I was fortunate. One very important person appeared in my life, and that was we had a neighbor who was a grocer. The grocer had 3 or 4 daughters. One of them was called Sushila, and she married a Raddiwala from Mumbai. So Dombivli is 50 kilometers from Mumbai. So Sushila, the daughter, used to come with her husband, the Raddiwala, to her house from time to time for a visit. And so I came to know that I started talking to him, and I came to know that there are people who give old magazines to the Raddiwala. And since he was operating out of Mumbai city, he had from foreign magazines like Time, Life, and others at that time. I asked him, you give me old magazines which come to your Raddi shop. So he started giving me old magazines. And the Raddiwala was the God's prophet for me, because every time I used to wait for him and for Sushila to come, because he would bring the old magazine. It's from those old magazines I started learning about different countries in the world, universe, different planets, and all that. Because our textbooks were very limited in what they taught.
Yes.
Yeah. Then I thought this is not enough just to depend on this. So I had an aunt who passed away recently, but she used to live in the Mumbai city. And a couple of times a year we used to visit her, me and my sister. That was our only outing from Dombivli. And she was not too far from Malabar Hill, where tourists visit. So one day with the boys in her building, I went to the Malabar Hill, and I met some foreign tourists, and I started talking to them. I went to a Marathi medium school, by the way.
Okay.
So I thought I must practice English and learn the language. So I started talking to them to learn the language. And I thought some of these tourists were receptive. And then you talk in English, that's a medium, but what do you talk? Then the questions would come, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Germany, or I'm from Poland. Oh, then what is in Germany? What is the lifestyle? What is the politics? Slowly. So I learned my global affairs from the Raddiwala and from the tourist on the streets of Mumbai.
Interesting.
That is how I learned. While I was doing that, on the other side, I was also in the street gangs, and I was moving around with sticks and chains. And then at some stage, when I was 13 years old, I thought I have to make a decision that either I seek my self-worth in being the Dada, or I seek my self-worth by learning about the world. And slowly, not overnight, I moved towards the learning, and I gave up the gangs. So all this journey happened from the age of 10 to age of 16.
And by that time, your grandmother and sister and your father, they were a part of your family.
Yes, of course, yes.
And they were taking care of you. You were your sister is elder to you. She's younger. She's elder sister.
No, she's 1 year younger.
1 year younger sister to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is what she was also going to school. Of course, she was in the same school, 1 year younger. So
okay.
Yeah. So that is how. And then as I started learning about the countries, I started collecting stamps. I started collecting coins. Those days there used to be one chewing gum called A1 chewing gum.
Acha.
And the chewing gum was wrapped in a cover, and the cover had a picture of flag. And the chewing gum company, to promote the chewing gum, uh, used to organize a contest about flags. Who could collect maximum number of flags would get
Yes.
certain prizes. And if you collected many flags, then you would get a prize, and the prize was normally an album with information on all the countries, one basic information. So this is how I learned about the world affairs, and uh, uh, and from there to addressing the United Nations Security Council today, it's been a bit of a journey.
So then you pursued this line, right? So what did you do your graduation or post graduation, and how did you land up to where you are right now? I really want to know the transition, and how then you just spearheaded your career, and how that journey has been as well.
So then, when I finished my SSC, which was the old SSC 11th standard, nowadays I think SSC is 10th standard. So then I went to the college in Mumbai,
Okay.
college, which had a very good reputation
Okay.
those days. So because I was doing well in my maths,
Academics.
I used to get good marks. So I had this dual character: the gangs on the one side, and
Yeah.
good academic plus learning from the old books from the Radimart and all, and the tourist status on the other side. So I had this dual. And you know why the gangsters, the boys, they came to me, and why I had a safe space in the gangs, because I used to go around with those gangs, and then I used to sit with those boys who were leading the gangs, and I used to teach them
Wow.
from the school. Uh, and uh, and so it was an exchange of knowledge and strength. So they give me a strength and a protection, and I used to give them the knowledge. So that was the
Very
thing.
interesting.
So those gangsters, they wanted to learn. So they said that, look, I mean, you are good in maths, and all the girls look at you and smile, and I mean, we also want to learn. And I said, that's also one way the girls can smile at you.
Yeah. Yes.
uh,
Very strong motivation.
yeah. So 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 then I joined the Sydenham College, and then I got involved in all kinds of youth activities, not the college but university wide. And so I came to the attention of some of the people in Mumbai. So I went for a commerce course. So when I finished the final year, I mean, when I was finishing the final year, I got a letter from Vyadi Tata,
Oh.
which was not personal to me. It was written to few hundred people involved in youth activities.
Yes.
So they had a roster of students who were involved in various kinds of youth activities. So it was a letter written by Vyadi Tata, which was almost printed. I think his signature was also printed. I have kept it. I have to see. It looks real, but I think it was. And it basically said that there was a conference, international conference, on the role of liberalism in North-South dialogue. And it said that Mr. Tata was writing to all the young leaders, and he was chairman of the selection committee, and he wanted to send somebody young who could come up with fresh ideas on the subject of role of liberalism in North-South dialogue. And so, what Mr. Tata did, to be fair, he asked all the young people, whoever is interested should send an essay on this subject. And whichever ideas were appreciated by his team, that person would be sent to Spain for this conference. So I decided to participate. Now, I knew the meaning of role, I knew the meaning of off, and I knew the meaning of in. Only these three words. The rest of the words I didn't know.
Role of in.
I didn't know. Yeah. But I like a person who's crazy. I went to the libraries in Mumbai. I studied these subjects, and in 10 days' time, I wrote the essay, because the examination was after 12 days. Exam, final exam. I gave the essay. The Indian Selection Committee, under Mr. Tata's chairmanship, they liked my essay the best from all the essays they got in India. And so they nominated me to go to Spain.
Okay.
And then there was a second round of selection, which took place in Spain. And finally, I got selected there also. And so I went to Spain for this. But I went well prepared. And when I went to Spain, I found that, Mr. Tata's team had told me that this is the conference for young leaders. So I went there and I found that those young leaders from all over the world were actually young members of parliament and ministers, or directors of research in the universities. So they were not young like a fresh student.
Got it. Yeah.
they were all young political leaders basically in the parliament. They were leaders of the liberal parties, and Mr. Tata was sympathetic to Swatantra Party, and that's how that responsibility had come to him to select it. So I was suddenly in Valladolid, in Spain, spending 8 days with young established politicians, ministers, members of parliament, and also academic leaders. And we were discussing North-South dialogue. North-South dialogue was very popular in international politics in the 1970s because there was a growing awareness in the West that the West had been unfair to the countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, colonization. So there has to be some kind of a reverse. And so there was a lot of debate among the Western intellectuals that we have to make it possible for these newly independent countries to grow. And so our countries were called South, those countries were called North, so North-South dialogue on new international economic order. And so I went with some ideas, and I found that the people there, irrespective of whether they came from North or South, were very appreciative of my ideas. So I got confidence. So I came back and I was looking for a job. While looking for a job, I started reading about international economic relations. And then I came out with a theory of how the international financial system could be restructured. And I went around somewhere in Mumbai, and somebody took me to Financial Express. And I went there, and I went to one man, and I said, I've written this essay. He said, you leave it here. And I left and went. 15 days later, it was published. I was 20 years old, and I published an op-ed in Financial Express not on what to do with the economy of Mumbai, but how to change the economy of the entire world. So then I said that. Then again I did a round of libraries, and I collected addresses of prominent economists and others at that time. And then somebody helped me to get photocopies of that newspaper article, the Financial Express, and I sent to various economists. And John Timbergen was the first Nobel laureate in economics. Nobel Prize in economics was very new; it was just instituted. And he wrote to me, and he was saying, "This is fabulous. The global economic discourse should be around this, around what you're saying."
Wow.
And one after another, every prominent economist started writing to me, basically saying this in different words. Now, my biggest strength at that time was that we were living in an era prior to the digital age. So nobody had any way to find out, to do a Google search on me and to find out who I was. All they had was my article.
Yes.
And my thoughts. And they just assumed, looking at the thoughts, that I might be some former finance minister of India or a professor or somebody like that. And so they didn't know I was a 20-year-old student. And so they just reacted to the thought. And they said that this is what. And then I sent to the politicians, like the US State Department and the White House and European Commission and all that. And they all hated the article.
Oh, acha.
So all the economists in the world liked it.
But
all the politicians in the
they
world
hated it.
Yeah. Because I was calling at that time for restructuring the world economy on the basis of cooperation, which would mean giving up your sovereignty to some extent. And they didn't want to.
Of course, they wouldn't want to. Yeah.
So they hated. But then there was somebody told me that there was a Oxford University was open, but had one unique scholarship where they would give a scholarship to somebody who had done something outstanding. So I wrote to them and I attached all the letters from the economists who were praising me and the political leaders who were opposing me. I mean, the political leaders means they were like the leader of the chairman of some congressional committee in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Office of Management of Budget of President of the United States, and those State Department, that's the politics. And I sent it to Oxford, and they saw both, and they said, I mean, we invite you with full scholarship and with everything, whatever you want to tell us. And after they sent me a cable, and after this they became quiet. And then I got worried. I thought, here I am breaking my mold of life set in Dombivli and going to the world's most prestigious university, and suddenly they become quiet. So I went through a long process, but in the end, my inquiry reached the university. And the person, one student who met them from Oxford, he asked, they said, look, this guy is overqualified for studies. I mean, he's like a professor, he's senior researcher. So we don't want to give a student scholarship to him. We student. So that student told me this is the problem. So I did a funny thing with the help of a friend. I wrote an essay now again to Oxford. It said my limitations and my weaknesses.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you wrote it in form of an essay. Oh, brilliant.
I wrote
That's,
an essay about how I am weak
yep,
and why I need the education.
yep.
And
Wow,
then I got that full scholarship on the strength of my second thesis, which talked about my weaknesses.
wow. Yeah, that's a genius move. Wow,
Yeah.
and a
So
genuine move.
once I went to Oxford, you know, things changed. Then it was, just moving ahead.
Yeah, makes sense. Sandeep, so one last question I want people to tell what is your current role in which organization and what and how does your day-to-day job look like? What do you do on a daily basis? As in what capacity and in which organization? This people would also want to know.
So, in 2002, so after coming from Oxford, I worked in research for some time, policy research. And in 2002, I set up a think tank called Strategic Foresight.
Strategic foresight, yes.
Strategic Foresight Group.
Strategic foresight group.
www.strategicforesight.com. So if your viewers want to visit, they can see what I do there.
Yes.
So Strategic Foresight Group. And so what we do there, it's we've been doing research and we advise governments around the world on how they should solve their problems. And I have advised in the last 20 years 65 governments
Wow.
from different continents. So I don't do much here in India, but I have advised almost exactly 65 governments around the world
Wow.
in Asia, in Middle East, Africa, even Europe, uh, everywhere. And I had 20 people research team. Then in 2020, I thought I should slow down, and I helped many of them to move to other jobs, or some of them got on their own. And uh, and uh, uh, only now we change the models. So now only the three co-founders of Strategic Foresight Group, we work together on fewer but high impact initiatives. But all my researchers who solve the problems, we solve the problem between Turkey and Iraq. We gave them the formula for negotiating the management of Tigris River shared by them. We prepared the first ever global terror threat indicant in the world. Lot of things. And finally, I shaped some part of the agenda of the UN Security Council. And in 2016, I was invited to address the historic meeting of the UN Security Council on water, peace, and security, along with the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, at that time. So my typical day has been, traveling 20, 25 days every month, mostly prime ministers, foreign ministers, parliamentary members, senior ambassadors, discussing their problems, giving the solutions, and helping them to implement those solutions, negotiating between conflicting parties. And my research team uh, was giving me backup and uh, uh, research backup. They would do the research actually. Their research that brought ideas, they would prepare for my trips. And all these researchers were average 27, 28-year-old girls. They were
Interesting.
solving the problems in the world, sitting
Wow.
in the national office in Mumbai. So
Wow.
that is the power of youth, and that's the power of Indian young leaders
Yes.
that they were solving. And yesterday I had a very, very, very happy day. Yesterday was a Sunday, and one of the girls who was my researcher, a research analyst, working in my office, she left and she went to Panama. And she said, sir, I want to go to Panama because she's half Panamanian and half
Okay.
Indian.
Okay.
She said, I have been experiencing India. I want to try, Panama. That's the other side of her family. And in a month's time, she called one of the other co-founders of Strategic Foresight Group. And she said, you know what? I'm swearing in as the Home Minister of Panama tomorrow.
Wow.
Here, she went to become minister. And a year
Brilliant.
later, she became Foreign Minister of Panama. Janina Tibani. She just came
Wow.
4 months ago. So a girl was my researcher, research analyst in my office. Within a year, she became home minister. She became foreign minister. Last 5 years, she was foreign minister. In fact, our foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, American foreign minister, Anthony Blinken, these all people going to Panama to meet her. Who was,
Wow.
who
Wow.
was just, who was until one other girl, she is heading ICRC Red Cross in one of the stations in Africa. The one who didn't work with us but worked with the partner organization is in the secretary of the UN Security Council.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So this is where my team is.
Yep.
One boy, he's in Singapore. He's heading the entire due diligence and global security division of Deutsche Bank globally. And
Wow.
these people are in their 30s. This is what young Indian people are capable of. If
Yeah.
you give them a framework, this is
Makes
what.
sense. That's a
So
very
I
great
gave them
insight.
a framework. I gave them opportunities to travel, and
Yes.
that's what they did.
Yeah.
So now that, so I didn't build my own organization. I didn't want to build a castle. I didn't want to build an empire. I didn't want to build Sandeep House or SFG House. But I got now so many ambassadors from this government, that government to uh, uh, ICRC, to companies, to think tanks, everywhere.
Yeah.
Then 3 years ago, I said, this managing all these super brilliant people is a bit too taxing and traveling at the same time. And
Yep.
so I changed the pattern. And in COVID, nobody could do anything. So that's when I wrote A Word Without War.
Oh, okay.
And since Word Without War has been published, I am just engaged in all discussion on Word Without War
Yep.
book, because Word Without War is published by HarperCollins India, so it's not international. It's not HarperCollins International. So it's
Yeah.
available only in India.
Mm.
Despite that, there have been discussions on Word Without War, this book, what we are discussing today, in
Translating.
Rome, Oxford University, Geneva, New Zealand, all kinds of
Yeah.
places. Even the book is not available.
Yeah.
Even last year, a French edition came out
Mm.
of the book, and two Nobel laureates flew to France to launch this book,
Wow.
along with the chairman of UN Secretary General's High Level Advisory Board.
Mm.
So the French, and now in 2025, the Spanish edition is coming out, and locally a Marathi edition is coming out,
Mm.
and the, and so, and now it's advanced, because now I started getting demand. The Russians want Russian edition, the Turks want Turkish edition, Hungarians want Hungarian edition. So now I am negotiating with somebody for an international edition.
Makes sense.
It will be coming out in North America and then hopefully spread all over the world.
No, this has a potential. As I said, this really has a potential of becoming as famous as Harari's books, because this is written in a way. This is
Yeah.
not limited to one geography. Your audience is global. This is what I thought. When I read, I'm like, wow, I'm so happy that we are writing books like that. It filled my heart with joy that yes, this is our answer to Harari. We look at the kind of book that you've written. So Sandeep, it was remarkable. So on the topic of a book, let's get to the last part of it, book reading. Sandeep, which part of the book would you like to read? It can be a couple of paragraphs. It could be introduction, anything that you would want to.
There are lots of paras which are my favorite, but there is, since Ukraine war is very much being discussed in
Yeah.
the world, I will I will read a half page.
Let's do that.
A visit to Ukraine just before the war,
Oh
and
wow, let's do that.
it's very interesting. A Word Without War, Chapter 2. The cobbled path of Andrishki descent in Kiev tells the story of how easy it is for warmongers to fool us. It connects the Baroque style St. Andrew Church at the top of the steep Samkona Hora hill to Kontaktova Square below, winding down over 700 meters. This little path is known for its art galleries and small museums. It might also be the only street in the world that has a museum dedicated to the street itself. Every Sunday morning, on the sidewalk of Andrishki descent, grandpas and grandmas exhibit their treasures and invite shoppers to buy their trinkets. The wrinkles on their face invite empathy. On a wintry day, they wrap themselves in blankets. They seem to be the children and grandchildren of soldiers in the Second World War. They sell the insignia of military uniforms, mostly belonging to Stalin's forces and some recovered from Nazi soldiers. In the Second World War, Young men had worn the insignia of their countries with great pride. That is what they fought for. They earned medals at the cost of their lives. Their pride in their nation ruined the continent. Their patriotism killed, maimed, and raped hundreds of thousands of people. But the uniform justified it all. Today, the insignia is on sale on bedsheets spread on the footpath. The symbols of honors that led to the murder of millions, obliterated trillions of dollars of economic assets, and devoured humanity are available for anyone to purchase in exchange for a few euros.
Brilliant. I remember reading this. It was very moving and, of course, very relevant. And again, Sandeep, this was beautiful. Your book is powerful, and I wish it reaches all the corners. And whichever publishing house you are, trying to speak with, I hope they just make it reach out. This is must required, absolutely must required book.